Joining us now to discuss the big Jordan Love news from late last week, is our Packers writer here at The Athletic, Matt Schneidman. Matt, thank you for joining us, sir.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to come on. It was funny since I did not go to any of the three Packers practices this weekend since I was at one of my best friend's weddings in Denver, and I was let's say several drinks deep at the welcome party on Friday night when the Jordan Love news broke. I knew it was going to happen once I flew out to Denver and he hadn't signed the extension yet. And I was texting with Diana Rossini earlier on Friday, and we kind of had a feeling that it was coming. I was like, "Oh, there's nothing you can do about it now." I had already pre-written something, but yeah, Jordan Love locked up for the next couple years at least. And what a road it's been. Yeah, I remember sitting on my couch at home during COVID in 2020, watching them draft him, and I was stunned. I think just like everybody else, but here we are.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of thing. I'm on the road, and so I'm interacting with the news differently than I would typically. I'm just like catching random snippets when I like check Twitter every like few hours because I'm on the move. And we had already recorded something on Friday, and it's just like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that for like 24 hours. We'll figure out what the plan for that is a little bit deeper into the weekend. And this is where we landed, and I'm happy that we did. I understand why the Packers felt like they had to do this based on the movement in the market this offseason. And if I'm Jordan Love's people, and if I'm David Mulugheta, I'm looking at the contract that Trevor Lawrence got and said, our guy's done more in high leverage moments, even if it's only been half a season, than Trevor Lawrence has done in his career. Whether or not you believe that in terms of how the quality of the quarterbacks, you could make that argument. So it felt like the Packers were in kind of a tough spot based on the way the quarterback market has unfolded this year and what Jordan Love did in the back half of the year. So did you feel like this sort of conclusion where it's really the best quarterback contract that we've seen because it's only a 4-year deal? I mean, it's a really, really strong contract. Is this where you kind of expected this thing to land ultimately as you saw the chessboard as the season unfolded? Or did you feel like there were some other paths that the Packers were either hoping to take or that this might have gone that ultimately didn't unfold?
Yeah, I think as the season unfolded, I started to say, okay, this is probably getting into the 40s. And it went from, okay, Daniel Jones type contract to, okay, this might start with a 5. And then once we saw the Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence contracts, it's, okay, this might, be 56. And I was actually a little surprised he wasn't the standalone number one in average annual value. He's obviously tied with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, but we all know this. These contracts are not based on what you've done, but also what you're projected to do. And I can't count the number of people I've seen say, "Oh, but he's only played 8 games. Let him play the first half of next season." Well, you can't do that because if he plays really well, the price only goes up, and the Packers don't want to pigeonhole themselves into that conundrum. And also, this could seem like a bargain in a couple of years. I mean, the first extension the Packers gave Devontae Adams, by the time they were up for another one, he was like the 14th highest paid receiver in the league, and he was the best receiver in football. So that's just the way things work. It's a big risk. But the Packers are no stranger to taking a big risk with this guy. They drafted him with 4 years left on Aaron Rodgers' contract. And like you just said, let's say there's someone out there who says Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love are of equal talent right now. Jordan Love only has one full season starting. So you could argue that, he has a higher ceiling because he's accomplished talent-based alone what Trevor has in, 3 years that he's started now?
Yeah.
So I think Jordan's a really good player. And you have to keep in mind this. While we have only seen him for one season, this team and these people giving him this money have seen him every single day for 4 years. They know what he brings to the table. They have a better sample size to project what he's going to become than we do. So I think people on the outside have learned to maybe trust Brian Gutekunst, that maybe he knows what he's doing more so than it once seemed. But I think this is a really talented kid. And is he going to play as well as he did the second half of last season, which was, right there with Purdy and Prescott for the best QBs in football? I don't know. But even if he's slightly below that, I think it's still a good deal.
Talking to people in the building, was there any sort of hesitance or trepidation like, man, we are taking a pretty big risk here based on the sample size? Or do you think that the people making these decisions actually feel pretty good about them?
I think they feel pretty good because something Brian Gutekunst said on Saturday morning He said, yeah, there's going to be some challenges down the road, and we can get into those later with kind of the structure of this contract. But he said, I'd much rather have this quote unquote problem than the problem of not having a franchise quarterback. Even before they paid him, Gutekunst said, we have our franchise quarterback. We know he's our franchise quarterback. The deal not being done and Jordan not practicing is not a result of us deciding if we're going to pay him. It was just kind of fine tuning the details of this contract. So I don't think there was any hesitancy. They've known for quite some time now, at least since, probably the end of last season, maybe even earlier than that, that he was going to be their franchise guy, that they were going to pay this money.
The only problem with this, and again, like Gutekunst said, and this organization is used to it. It's a good problem to have. By doing it this way, you have such a small window. One, to decide whether you're going to pay the guy because he's not playing very often, and two, you don't really get to wield the advantages of a rookie quarterback contract. Like that lasted for essentially 1 year. And you'd much rather have this set of circumstances where like, the guy's already expensive and we didn't have a huge timeline to decide how much we wanted to pay our really good quarterback rather than not having one at all. Like this is definitely the beneficial path, but there are still realities that come along with it. And I mean, he's going from making essentially nothing to having a $29 million cap hit in 2025 on a roster that's already full of like pretty expensive guys. For the most part, I mean, this team is pretty much what it's going to be now that they've made the Xavier McKinney signing. Like there aren't going to be many splashy outside signings for the most part over the next couple of years, I would guess, now that this is in place. And that's fine. They've got a ton of guys on rookie controlled contracts, especially at skill position players, etc. But that's the difference between this and a normal runway with a rookie quarterback before you decide whether you're going to pay him. You have more time to do that, and they really just didn't at all. The entire thing is just fast-tracked for them in a way we do not typically see.
Right. Like ideally you would have kind of a CJ Stroud situation where he's on his rookie contract for another couple of years and you know what you have. You know you're going to eventually pay him, but you don't have to yet. What the Packers would say is, well, yeah, ideally that's what you want, but Jordan wouldn't be the guy he is today, the guy that earned this contract if he hadn't sat for 3 years behind Aaron. Jordan said it himself the other day. He didn't feel he was ready until probably his third season, 2022. But Aaron was coming off back-to-back MVPs. They couldn't move on from him, even if they wanted to. Aaron has told me way back when that he thought he maybe had 1-2 years left, but he kind of extended his timeline because he won those back-to-back MVPs. So it was kind of extended, and the Packers were pigeonholed into, really only having 1 year, like you said, on that rookie deal to figure out if he was the guy. And part of that is because of Aaron. Part of that is because Jordan just, came into a situation where he wasn't going to be the guy right away. They got, I don't want to say lucky, but they got fortunate that they got that definitive answer the second half of last season, because the first half of the season, Packers were 2-5. They were 3-6. It's like, okay, well, if they kind of keep middling this year, do you give him another year not knowing what he's got? Like, it was going to be really complicated there for a second. So the way Jordan played the second half of last season made it, like we just talked about, really easy for them to decide. And now they, go right back into a world where they have one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, like they did with Aaron. But I will say the advantageous thing about this is their wide receivers and tight ends, really, because you mentioned Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs, you got Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander. Like there are high paid players on either side of the ball, but you got Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. Those are your top 6 pass catchers, all still on their rookie contracts. So I don't want to say the Packers window is the next 2 years or whatever, but before they start to get in some cap trouble, because Jordan's cap numbers the next 3 seasons, next 2 seasons, it goes from about 20.2 million to about 30 to 36 to 42 to 74. So, the next 2 years, they're pretty darn manageable. And then that's when guys like Watson and Dobbs and Reed and Wicks are going to start wanting to get paid. So might as well win a Super Bowl this year, right?
And that's, you always have to offset these huge deals with a bunch of rookie contract players. Like that you have to have the balance.
Right.
And I think them approaching it the way that they had with so many picks over the last 2 years, they've set themselves up well to do this. And you allude to this. If you look at the structure of it, it's kind of halfway between some of these pay-as-you-go contracts and some of the fake money deals that are prorated, like the Jalen Hurts contract. Like, it's not all the way there. Jordan's cap hits are a little bit bigger than that, but there's still 3 void years tacked on to the end of this. He still has a massive cap hit in 2028 that has a $44 million base salary. He'll never play on that. Like, if we get to that point, they'll just convert that thing and just keep kicking it down the road. Right. And when I'm talking about the financial realities of this, it's not that this is a bad thing. It's just unique. We're not used to dealing with this truncated of a timeline with quarterbacks in the NFL, and it's forced them to have to consider some stuff and build things in a certain way. But you would deal with this problem 100 times out of 100 if you were any organization in the league. And like you alluded to, they're used to this. Like, they've had to build around Rodgers and figure out, when do we restructure? How do we move some money around here? This is not new territory for this team, and I think it leaves them well equipped to navigate this in a way that maybe some other front offices wouldn't be as adept at doing.
Yeah, and even this year, I'm looking at over the cap right now. I think the Packers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th in cap space right now, and that's factoring in Jordan's cap charge this year. They still have over $22 million in cap to spend this year, so they're in a solid spot. They're out of the cap hell, if you will, that they were in the final years of the Aaron Rodgers era. And last season was kind of all about getting out of that. And now I wouldn't say they're right back in it yet, but it would be advantageous, like I was saying, if they win now before they, get back in it in a couple of years, because the cycle comes for everybody. And like I said, Brian Gutekunst would much rather this than having plenty of cap space and not a good quarterback.
Looking at it right now, this shouldn't probably be surprising, but the Packers are dead last in the NFL in cap spending at wide receiver, which when your entire group is made up of rookie contract players, that makes total sense. They're slated to be 30th in 2025. And if you look at the offensive line this year is 30th. And next year, I believe they're 27th. So this is how you survive. If you're going to pay your quarterback this, you have to offset it by not spending a ton in other places. The Chiefs are like this. If you look at the Chiefs' offensive line spending before last season when they signed Juwan Taylor, Creed Humphrey was on a rookie deal, Trey Smith was on a rookie deal. Even with Joe Thuney, similar to the Packers, they had one expensive guard, and other than that, it was a lot of cheap players, and then they've restocked their receiver room with a bunch of cheap guys. So it's just about finding balance somewhere on the roster, and again, not surprisingly, the way that Brian Gutekunst has done this, the holistic view of it and the holistic approach, the Packers have that, and I think it sets them up to really weather this in a really good way.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this comes down to, like you just said, finding ways to replenish your roster with young talent. And Brian Gutekunst hasn't been great at drafting wide receivers until the last couple of years. Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, and Reed seem pretty solid, but before that, it was like Equinemius St. Brown, MVS, like Jamon Moore. It wasn't great. But historically, Brian Gutekunst, obviously a Ted Thompson disciple, they got Randall Cobb, James Jones, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Greg Jennings. All those guys were Ted Thompson draft picks in the second or third round. And then offensive line too. Corey Linsley, David Bakhtiari, Josh Sitton, TJ Lang, Zach Tom, all day 3 picks. Elton Jenkins is a multi-time Pro Bowler. But you were talking about the offensive line right now. Their starting left tackle is a 2022 7th-round pick. Their left guard's Jenkins, so he already got his big money extension. Their center, Josh Myers, still on his rookie deal, and I would imagine he's probably not going to get a second contract. Their right guard is either their first-round rookie this year or their 2022 third-round pick, and then their right tackle, Zach Tom, is still on his rookie deal. So like you said, that's how you make it work with a high-priced quarterback, is you are good at drafting and developing at multiple positions on that side of the ball. And the Packers just so happen to be one of the best at doing it at those 2 positions.
And sometimes it has to come after you give the quarterback the contract, like the Bengals a little bit. It's like, okay, especially on defense, we microwave this. Now we really have to rely on our draft picks. The Packers thankfully got ahead of that problem. Like, it's already been proven that they have some of these guys who are going to be pretty foundational pieces for them. If we're looking at Jordan Love's season specifically, talking about on-field stuff, as you've watched him over the first week of training camp or so, as you've talked to people there, are there areas of his game or that apply to this offense as a whole where you see a little bit more upside and a little bit of progress from where this group was a year ago?
Yeah, we were talking to Tom Clements this offseason, and he's been the quarterback coach in Green Bay for Favre, Rodgers, and now Love. He's
since I cared about football.
Yeah, still doing it. And I think him still being here is a testament to the promise he sees in Love in a way. And something he told us this offseason was one specific area he saw improvement in Jordan last season was Jordan is so athletic. Like, he can make throws off platform. He can run around. But earlier in the season, Jordan would take off from the pocket and just put his head down and run. And Tom Clements said as the season went on, Jordan would learn to take off from the pocket and keep his head up and still look for plays downfield, because once the quarterback leaves the pocket, the defense maybe has a tendency to collapse on the quarterback, and that opens things up downfield behind defenders. And Jordan and Tom Clements have realized that, when you take off, there are massive plays to be had if you just keep your head up instead of putting your head down and running. And, that's probably an area they'd like to continue to grow in. Now he still has to work on Tom Clements' 3 mortal sins of the position, which I believe are no blind throws, no predetermined reads, and no throwing across your body over the middle. And Jordan did, I think, all 3 of those on one play on his last throw of the season against the 49ers to end that game in the divisional round. So obviously you got to rid yourself of that. But I mean, when you throw 18 touchdowns and 1 interception over the last, I don't know what it was, 7 games of the regular season or whatever it was, there's not much to improve upon. But they really like where he's at in this offense. He has complete command of it. Matt LaFleur said the other day, I think it's just about finding ways to keep defenses off balance and feeding all the mouths that are going to want to be fed in this offense this year.
Yeah, it's a real bummer as someone who's from where I'm from and roots for the team that I've always rooted for, that the Packers can make another quarterback the highest paid player in the league, and it is not an objectively shit upon decision. People are just like, yeah, that's the level that he played at last year.
So.
This is the world that we live in, unfortunately, and thankfully for me, I've gotten very, very used to it. Matt Schneidman, always great to chat with you, sir. I'm looking forward to seeing you up in Green Bay in 2-ish weeks. So I will see you then, and be good to see you, and good luck with the rest of the camp, and good luck as we get toward the season here.
Appreciate it, brother. See you soon.